So we first need to collect the blossoms of the dandelion. No green parts. You don't want any of the green parts because it'll give off a very bitter flavor, and you just need the flower. One thing you don't want to do is break off and then try to peel it, because a lot of times you'll get that white bitterness in there, and sometimes you get it on your hands and then it just makes everything all bitter. So I try not to do that. And I need to fill this bag almost to the top with these. It's going to take some time. A lot of the dandelions in my field have already gone to seed, but there are still quite a few out there. I mean, you'll find them all year long. I see a whole bunch of them over there by the wood pile. Go over there. Yeah, there's still bunches of them out here. Trying to get the bigger ones. Just makes it a lot easier to fill my bag with some bigger flowers. So I'm going to work on these. These are quite a bit bigger. When picking these, make sure that you're not picking them in an area that has fertilizers or, animals have been going to the bathroom. You want it in a nice clean area, and preferably without a lot of bugs. I remember when I was younger and my dad and I used to go out and get earthworms for fishing, and we used to go out and you'd see all these dandelion stems and they look just like earthworms. Made it very difficult to find the worms. Alright, it's starting to rain, so I'm going to head in. I got enough to make a batch of dandelion wine, but I'm always on the lookout for some big ones, like that one. There's some big ones. Ooh. We're going to need 1 gallon of filtered water, preferably. This is RO water, which is like filtered 4 times. So we'll just fill this up until we get a gallon. Then we pour that water into a pot that can hold a gallon. Cover it up, set your heat on high, and wait for it to boil. While we're waiting for the water to boil, we're going to cut up 1 lemon. Make sure to wash the entire lemon before you start cutting it, because you're going to be throwing the peels in along with the flesh. And I just cut it up into chunks. And 2 oranges. Again, wash them before you cut them up. Now, a lot of the older recipes used regular bread yeast, kind of like this, because people didn't really have champagne yeast or any other type of yeast. I've got pasture red. I thought I had some champagne yeast in here somewhere. Montrachet. That'll work. You could buy this online. It's really inexpensive, but this actually works better for making wine. You don't get that weird bread flavor when you're all done. And when you get done picking all of your dandelion flowers, you should have about 2 quarts. That's more than enough to make 1 gallon of dandelion wine. I don't rinse it because you're actually washing off all of the things that you need to be in the wine itself. And that's the yellow substance that comes off on your fingers when you're picking them. So I suggest just check it for bugs, make sure there's no leaves or anything in it, and use it as is. I just got finished canning my homemade sauerkraut. I do that a couple times a year. We go through it pretty quick. Believe it or not, this is 2 heads of cabbage that's fermented down into sauerkraut. I'll have to make a video on that later. It's pretty easy. Alright, so the water's starting to boil. We can add our dandelion petals. I should turn this heat down on the low also. This a stir so it all gets incorporated way down inside the water. Okay, everything's looking soggy. That's good. And then we'll turn off the heat, cover it up, and set our timer for 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes is up. We'll now transfer that to another pot through a strainer and get these petals out of there. Press out all that goodness. Transfer this back here. Let that cool down, and then I will feed it to the chickens. You should end up with a liquid that looks like apple cider. And now we need to let this cool down until it gets to about 90 degrees because we don't want to kill our yeast. I usually go a little bit lower than that just to make sure, but at 90 it's pretty good. Alright, now before this cools down, I want to add 8 cups of just pure white sugar. I am short. And get this stirred in. It's a lot easier to stir the sugar in while it's hot than after it cools down. Alright, so I got the thermometer set for 90 degrees for our alarm. Covered it up, and we'll just let that sit until it gets down to the temperature we need. Alright, so we're at 99 degrees. I'm going to get the lemon and oranges in here, which will cool down even more. Alright, we're currently at 91 degrees, and by the time I transfer it into the other container, it should be down another degree. Alright, I'm going to put a little bit in this cup right here. And then the rest will go in here. Now the reason for this small container is so that we have a place to mix up the yeast. I'm just going to put this, add the yeast. And give this a stir. I'm going to cover this up for the time being, and then we're going to just let this yeast activate just to make sure that it's good. Otherwise I'll use some other yeast. Alright, so it's been about 15 minutes and the yeast has bloomed, so it's good to pour in. Alright, so when fermenting, you want to keep the level down below at least an inch from the top. Otherwise, as it's fermenting, it'll want to bubble up and come out and go all over the place. So what I'm going to end up doing now is corking this up. Let me clean this first and then wash off the outside of the container, and we'll put it in a nice dark place. All this is a lid that goes to this container, and I drilled a hole in the top of it, and I put a regular airlock used for fermentation on top. Alright, so it's all cleaned off. I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it in my little fermentation area that I always use for sauerkraut and beer and wine, and just leave her back there. We'll check on it in 3 weeks, and it should be good to bottle up and store in the fridge. Okay, it's time to bottle this dandelion wine. It's been 3 weeks and 2 days. I had some other things going on, so I didn't have time to do it this past weekend, but I'm going to do it today, and I'll show you how we get this in bottles, and then we will taste test it. Alright, so what you're going to need is a secondary vessel to put the dandelion wine in, and you don't want any of the sediment from the dead yeast or any of the fruit at the top getting into it. So what you use is a little strainer, and we'll just dump this directly into there. I'm using the same container that I boiled the water in because I know it's 1 gallon and it will fit. So careful opening this up so that the airlock doesn't dump water inside of the wine. Give it a smell. Smells good. Smells good. I'll just take and pour this in here. And what we'll do with the remaining is put that in a bowl. We'll dump out the rest of the fruit. Let's do this. And we'll let that settle out. And we'll just pour this back in the original container. I'll put it in the fridge, and the yeast should settle out. Or the dead yeast should settle out. And this will go into the fridge. I got some sangria bottles with the caps on, so it's really easy to fill up and put it in the fridge and then seal when not using it. And there you go, sealed bottle. We'll put this in the fridge and let it chill. Let me get the rest of this filled up in the other bottles, and I'll put these in the fridge and let them sit. So it's been sitting in the fridge for a while. It's nice and icy cold. Let me give it a try. Delicious. Thanks for stopping by. Bye.